Welcome to class 9 students. This is the continuation part of the chapter movement of water, minerals, foods and gases. In my previous video I completed discussing with you till osmosis, and I've explained what are the two types of passive transport, which are diffusion and osmosis. So all those are done. Today I am going to continue with the topic of active transport. Now, what is active transport? To understand active transport, you need to remember the definition of passive transport, which was a spontaneous movement of atoms from their concentration of higher concentration area to their lower concentration area. Okay. So, in case of passive transport, what happens? The molecules move freely, spontaneously on their own from higher concentration area to the lower concentration area without any external help. But in case of active transport, from the name you can understand that this type of transport is taking place actively. That means external energy is required in this case. Okay, just read the definition of active transport. Transport of molecules or ions across the membrane that require expenditure of energy. What it requires? Two things. It requires external energy, expenditure of external energy, and it also requires carrier proteins. Now, what are carrier proteins? Why they require these carrier proteins? I will discuss them later on. But right now, read the definition. And occur against concentration gradient is known as active transport. So the main two differences between passive and active transport is that passive transport does not need any external energy or carrier proteins, but active transport needs expenditure of energy and carrier proteins. On the also that in case of passive transport, it is happening along the gradient, that means from higher to lower concentration. But in case of active transport, it is occurring against the gradient. Okay, so these are the two main differences between active transport. Now you can ask me that, ma'am, why active transport is needed in some cases, why passive transport cannot be performed in those cases. So for that, there are two main factors in which cases active transport is needed and passive transport cannot work. Okay, so the first point is minerals are present in the soil as charged particles which cannot move across the cell membrane. So charged particles cannot move on their own across the cell membrane from one part of the membrane to the other part, and they need some help or external energy or external help which will help them to cross the membrane. Okay, and the second factor is that the concentration of minerals in the soil is usually lower than the concentration of the mineral in the root. Since the roots of the plants, they absorb minerals and nutrients from the soil, they are constantly absorbing the nutrients, right? So after some time, the concentration of the minerals and the nutrients become less in the soil and more in the roots of the plants. Okay, so in that case, this is against the concentration gradient. Minerals will obviously move from the soil to the roots of the plant body, but it is against the concentration gradient from an area of lower concentration to an area of higher concentration. So that needs external energy. Okay, so these are the two reasons or factors why in some cases active transport is needed in case of passive transport, instead of passive transport. Okay, now we are done with what is the need of active transport, what is the definition of active transport. Now let's talk about how active transport is takes place. Okay, since active transport occurs against the concentration gradient, the carrier protein involved in it are also called pumps. Okay, just like the pumps we have at our homes that helps to transport water from the ground level till the top floor, here also the active the carrier protein. Suppose this is a carrier protein and this is the solute that needs to travel from this part of the membrane to the other part. Okay, so what will happen, the carrier protein will bind with the solute. How? It will, both will come together and they will bind with each other, the carrier protein and the solute. Now what has been formed, a solute carrier complex has been formed. A solute carrier complex has been formed, this one. Now this solute cannot move from this part of the membrane to the other part on its own, because either it needs external energy or it is against the gradient, so it needs some help. So the help is being provided by the pump or the carrier protein. Now since they are both attached to each other, it will help transport the solute from this part of the membrane to the other part. Let me draw it. Now it will move to this part, and here it has brought the solute on the other part of the membrane, and now its function is over, and now it will detach itself from the solute. Again they are separate, and again this pump, its main function is to help those proteins that need to move from this part of the membrane to that part, or vice versa. So it will look for any such other solute which needs to go from this side of the membrane to that side. Okay, so this is what active transport is, and this is how pumps and carrier proteins help in the active transport. Okay, I have explained here. Let me read from the book. Since active transport occurs against the concentration gradient, the carrier proteins involved in it are also called pumps. Just like in the pumps at our home, the water is going against the gravity, and that needs an external energy, which is the electrical energy. When we switch on the when we turn on the pump, when we switch on the pump, electricity is generated which pulls the water upwards. Okay, means external energy or help. Energy is required to activate the carrier proteins. Now this carrier protein, when it was here, it needs to be activated, and for that energy is required. Now the activated carrier picks up solute from the membrane surface and form solute carrier complex. The complex moves through the membrane and bring the solute bearing part towards the other surface. Now the complex breaks, as it has broken here. Breaks and releases the solute. It has released the solute. The free carrier protein again changes its position to pick up the any other solute. Okay, so I hope the carrier protein complex, the solute carrier complex, pumps, active transport, all these things are clear to you all. The next paragraph that you have, the small paragraph, 3-line paragraph, you don't have to go through that, you can skip it. Next we have the cell to cell transport or short distance transport. Here also you can just go through it, no need to learn it by heart, just read it if you want to, if you want the knowledge about all these things, but questions will not come from these things. But active transport, let me tell you, is very, very important. Okay, so in the next class I will be talking about ascent of sap and other topics, and then that part will be the last part for this chapter. Okay, thank you.